I made an awesome looking poster for A Plague Tale Requiem video game inside of Photoshop. I took this photo and started cutting out Amisha and Hugo from this photo using pen tool, which was a horrible time, obviously. I think I took around 30 minutes to cut it. And then I did another thing by adding the walls as well using the pen tool, which was another pain in the ass. I had one idea in my mind on how this whole thing would look, so I would go back and forth with some backgrounds. I would try to color correct them, but nothing was working until I ended up with this particular image. I thought this looked pretty good, and it was giving me that dark vibe that I feel like Plague Tale Requiem has. I immediately started working with the lighting. On the left side, there would be a lantern which will give this orange warm color. So that's why there was this orange warm highlight look. It would not be as harsh. It would be kind of soft. I then again also added some highlights in the front side of the wall to make sure that it catches the environment light. I made it a little bit too blue. It shouldn't be that much blue, but at the time I thought that is okay. Obviously, I was stupid. Once I realized I was being stupid, I decided to go with the white color instead. I would go back and forth with highlights because I thought something was missing until in the end, I decided to go with it. Now, obviously, it's a Plague Tale game. You will have to have rats, but I cannot have a bunch of rats on the screen. I tried, trust me, it looked horrible. So I went with 1 or 2 rats. I thought these rats can just sit over the top of that structure and that would be a perfect way to do it. I would add a bunch of highlights and shadows on these rats and eventually I would scrap the whole idea. Yep, I completely destroyed the whole thing because I felt like the background was not justifying what the sequel of the game is. According to the trailer, I kept on hearing about this island that they want to go to, and that's why I added this very dramatic looking island. Definitely the island will not look anything like I have added here, but drama makes everything perfect. With that in mind, I added some highlights on the front side and I think that completely matched. And obviously to make the scene more dramatic, I gotta add lightning. I tried to add different lighting textures and some would work, some would not. So I ended up with just having 2 of them and I added a bunch of glows. Obviously lightning is very bright and you need to have glow. And then immediately I went back into the highlights for Hugo and Amisha once again. Because the lighting is too bright, obviously they will be reflecting it as well. And speaking of highlights, I gotta add that in the mountain of the island. Obviously it will be much more brighter than it is right now, so that would make perfect sense. I felt the ocean was way too quieter, so I added a ship and it took a long time to cut it out. But in the end, I was successful and I was doing some color correction to make it look like it's from that image. The only one problem was there's this annoying sunlight that was coming through that ship, so I had to copy one part of the ship to the other and try to merge it as the best I can. And it kind of worked. It wasn't the perfect one, but it kind of worked. And also the idea was to hide it with a bunch of haze. And that's why I added a bunch of haze in front of the ship and around the sea as well. And again, as the lightning is affecting everything, it has to affect the ship too. So I added some highlights on the ship. I also added a white Plague Tale Requiem. Makes perfect sense. I also added some fog, but Amisha and Hugo are standing because I felt like something was missing or it felt out of the picture, and adding the haze made it better. Another thing that was missing was shadows. I felt like their backs were way too much bright, so I added a bunch of shadows as well. Again, going back and forth with the shadows and the highlights, making sure everything looks nice. In the end, I went with the camera raw filter to add some special effects and much more texture and stuff like that, some color correction here and there. And this is what I ended up with. After this recording, I actually went back to the Photoshop file after like 6 hours because I felt something was missing. And I did some changes here and there until I was satisfied with how it looked. I had a complete different picture in mind, but it ended up being this. And I think this is much more dramatic and a much better and cleaner way to show the game. But this is not the only poster I made. That's right, because there is another poster, this time from Marvel, that I made, Moon Knight. Check this video out to know how I made that one.